I didn't think much of it when Cole first knocked on my door. We'd been living together for about 2 months at that point. Same apartment, different schedules, barely overlapping lives except for the occasional late-night conversation in the kitchen or those quiet mornings where we'd both pretend not to be fully awake yet. Cole was easy to be around. That's the simplest way to put it. Not loud, not complicated, not the kind of guy who forced his presence into a room. But somehow, whenever he was there, things felt calmer, more grounded. We weren't close. Not really. Just roommates who got along better than expected. So when he knocked on my door around 10 p.m. on a random Tuesday, I assumed it was something normal. Yeah, I called out. The door opened slowly, and Cole leaned against the frame like he wasn't fully sure he should be there. Hey, he said. Hey, what's up? He hesitated. That should have been my first sign that whatever he was about to ask wasn't going to be normal. Can I ask you something kind of weird? He said. I sat up a little straighter on my bed, laptop still open in front of me. That depends. How weird are we talking? He gave a small, nervous smile. Not illegal. Just weird. All right, I said, closing my laptop halfway. Go for it. He didn't step inside. Just stayed there, one hand gripping the doorframe like it was holding him in place. I've been having trouble sleeping, he started. Okay, and it's not like normal insomnia. It's just, he ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. My brain won't shut up when I'm alone. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I get that. Do you? He asked, looking at me a little too directly. Sometimes, I admitted. Why? Another pause. Then he said it. Would you stay up with me for a bit? Just tonight. I blinked. That's it. I asked. He let out a breath, like he'd been expecting me to react worse. Yeah, just sit, talk, watch something. I don't know. It's easier when I'm not alone. There was something in his voice, something quiet, but real that made it hard to joke it off. Yeah, man, I said. That's not weird. You could have just said that. He nodded, but didn't move. You coming in or what? I added. That seemed to snap him out of it. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him a little too carefully. We ended up sitting on my bed, backs against the wall, some random show playing on my laptop. Neither of us really watched it. We talked instead about nothing at first. Work, dumb stories, things that didn't matter. But the longer we sat there, the quieter it got. Not awkward quiet. Just still. At some point, I glanced over at him. He was already looking at me. Thanks, he said softly. For what? For not making it a big deal. I shrugged. It's not a big deal. He smiled at that, but it didn't fully reach his eyes. You're good at that, he said. At what? Making things feel normal. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just looked back at the screen. We stayed like that for a while, talking less, just existing in the same space. Eventually, I checked the time. Dude, it's like 1 a.m., I said. You gonna try to sleep? He didn't answer right away. Then, quieter than before, he said, Can I ask you one more thing? I huffed a small laugh. You're really building suspense tonight. He didn't smile this time. Would it be weird if I stayed in here? He asked. That made me pause. Like, on the floor or something, he added quickly. I just don't really want to go back to my room yet. I studied him for a second. Cole wasn't the type to ask for things. Not like this. Yeah, that's fine, I said finally. You can take the couch if you want, though. He shook his head. I'm good here. I grabbed an extra blanket and tossed it toward him. He caught it easily, settling at the foot of the bed, leaning back against the wall. Comfortable? I asked. Yeah, he said. But he didn't look comfortable. He looked relieved. And that was the part that stuck with me. Not the request itself. Not the fact that my roommate was now sleeping in my room for no real reason. It was the way his shoulders finally relaxed. Like something inside him had been tense for longer than I realized. We turned off the lights not long after that. The room fell quiet. I expected it to feel strange. It didn't. If anything, it felt easier. Like the air wasn't as heavy as it usually was at night. Jason, he said into the dark. Yeah. Sorry again. For all this. It's fine, I said. Seriously. Another pause. Then, softer. It's just better when you're here. I stared at the ceiling, something in my chest tightening slightly. Get some sleep, Cole, I said. Yeah, he murmured. A few minutes passed. Then his breathing evened out. I should have fallen asleep too. But I didn't. Because I couldn't stop thinking about the way he said it. Better when you're here. At the time, I told myself it didn't mean anything. Just a guy who didn't like being alone. Just a weird night. But that was the thing about Cole. Nothing with him ever stayed just anything for long. The next morning, I almost convinced myself it hadn't been a big deal. Cole was already gone when I woke up. His blanket was folded neatly, like he didn't want to leave any trace he'd been there at all. My room looked exactly the same as always. If it weren't for the faint imprint on the carpet where he'd been sitting, I could have told myself I imagined it. I found him in the kitchen later, leaning against the counter with a mug in his hand. "Morning," he said, like nothing had happened. "Morning." There was a split second where I expected it to be awkward. It wasn't. He didn't avoid eye contact. Didn't act weird. If anything, he seemed lighter. "Sleep okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, nodding. "Best I've had in a while." Something about that stuck with me. "Good," I replied, grabbing a glass of water. He watched me for a second, then added, "Thanks again. For last night." "No problem." And just like that, we moved on. Or at least, I thought we did. It happened again 2 nights later. This time, he didn't hesitate. A soft knock on my door around the same time. "Come in," I called. Cole stepped in, hands in his pockets, like he'd already decided I wouldn't say no. "Hey, let me guess," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Your brain won't shut up again?" A small smile tugged at his lips. "Something like that." I gestured toward the bed. "You know the drill." That should have been the moment I questioned it. I didn't, because it felt normal already. Too normal. We fell into the same routine. Talking, half watching something, long pauses that didn't need filling. But this time, I noticed more. Like how close he sat compared to the first night. Not touching, just closer. And how he kept glancing at me mid-conversation, like he was checking something. Not in a suspicious way, more like he was making sure I was still there. At one point, I caught him staring. "What?" I asked. He blinked, then shook his head. "Nothing." "Dude, you can't say nothing like that and expect me to believe you." He exhaled through his nose, debating something internally. "Then, you don't get uncomfortable, do you?" "With what?" "This," he said, gesturing vaguely between us. "Me coming in here. Staying." I leaned back slightly, thinking about it. "I mean, it's not exactly typical roommate behavior," I admitted. He nodded, like he expected that. "But," I added, "I don't mind." His shoulders dropped a fraction. "Okay," he said quietly. That word carried more weight than it should have. That night, he didn't sit on the floor. He sat next to me. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that I was suddenly very aware of the space between us. Or lack of it. We kept talking, but something had shifted. Subtle, unspoken, but definitely there. At some point, the conversation died out completely. The show kept playing, neither of us paying attention. I could feel his presence next to me. Warm, steady, too noticeable. "You ever think," he said suddenly, voice low, "that some people just aren't meant to be alone?" I glanced at him. "That's a pretty heavy thought for a Tuesday." He huffed a quiet laugh. "I'm serious." "I don't know," I said. "I think everyone can be alone. Some people just hate it more." He turned his head toward me. "I don't hate it," he said. "Then what?" He hesitated. Then, barely above a whisper, "It just feels wrong." The way he said it made something in my chest tighten. I didn't respond right away, because suddenly, this didn't feel like a casual conversation anymore. It felt like something else. Something I wasn't sure I fully understood yet. "Jason," he said after a moment. "Yeah. Can I be honest with you?" I let out a quiet breath. "You're really into those tonight, huh?" He didn't smile. "Yeah," he said. "I am." That got my attention. I shifted slightly, turning more toward him. "All right. Go ahead." He looked down at his hands, then back up at me. "I don't think it's just about not wanting to be alone." Silence. I felt my pulse pick up a little. "What do you mean?" I asked. His eyes held mine this time. No hesitation. "It's you," he said. Just that. Simple. But it hit harder than anything else he'd said so far. "What about me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He swallowed. "I sleep better when you're in the room," he said. "I feel calmer. Less stuck in my head." "That's not that weird," I said quickly. "People feel like that around friends." "Yeah," he nodded. "Friends." The way he repeated it made it sound like a question. Or maybe a challenge. I wasn't sure. The air between us shifted again. He didn't move away. Neither did I. "You think this is weird?" he asked. I considered lying. "Instead," I said, "I think it's something." "That doesn't sound reassuring." "It's not supposed to be," I replied. He let out a quiet breath, like he appreciated the honesty. "Okay," he said. "Fair." Another pause. Then, softer. "Do you want me to stop?" That question landed heavier than anything else. Because now it wasn't just about him. It was about me too. I could have said yes. Probably should have. Set a boundary. Kept things simple. Instead, I heard myself say, I don't know. His eyes searched mine. For now, I added, I'm okay. That was all it took. That night, he stayed again. But this time, he didn't move to the floor. He stayed right next to me. Still no touching. Still that careful line neither of us crossed. But it felt closer. Too close to ignore. When the lights went off, the silence felt different. Charged. Like something was building, even if neither of us said it out loud. Jason, he murmured into the dark. Yeah. A pause. Then, thanks for not pushing me away. I stared at the ceiling, heart beating just a little faster than it should have. Go to sleep, Cole, I said quietly. Yeah, he replied. But neither of us fell asleep right away. And for the first time, I started to wonder if this was still just about him not wanting to be alone, or if I'd already agreed to something I didn't fully understand yet. After that night, things didn't go back to normal. They looked normal. We still had our usual routines, passing each other in the kitchen, casual conversations, the occasional joke that didn't mean anything on the surface. But underneath it, everything had shifted. Cole didn't knock anymore. He'd just show up. Not in a rude way. Not like he assumed anything. More like, he already knew I wouldn't say no. The first time he walked in without knocking, I barely reacted. Hey, he said, stepping inside like it was the most natural thing in the world. Hey, I replied, glancing up from my phone. No hesitation. No awkwardness. That should have bothered me. It didn't. And that was the problem. We fell into a pattern. Late nights. My room. Talking less, sitting closer. It became routine in a way that felt too easy. Too comfortable. One night, I caught myself setting things up without even thinking, pulling an extra pillow onto the bed, opening something to watch before he even showed up. That's when it hit me. I was expecting him, not just allowing it. Waiting for it. Jason. His voice pulled me out of my thoughts. He was already there, leaning against the door, watching me. You didn't knock? I said. You didn't seem surprised. I exhaled a quiet laugh. Fair. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. No hesitation anymore. That part was gone. We sat on the bed like usual. Closer than before. Close enough that our shoulders brushed when we shifted. Neither of us moved away. At some point, the show we'd put on faded into background noise. Again. It always did. You ever think we skipped a few steps? I said suddenly. He turned his head toward me. What do you mean? Like, most people don't go from roommates to whatever this is overnight. He studied me for a second. Then, quietly, do you want to go back? The question landed heavier than I expected. No, I said honestly. Then maybe we didn't skip anything, he replied. I frowned slightly. That doesn't make sense. It does, he said. If we were always heading here. That made my chest tighten. Were we? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Just looked at me. And that silence said enough. The space between us felt smaller than ever. Or maybe we just stopped pretending it was there. Cole, I said, my voice lower now. What are we doing? There it was. The question we'd both been avoiding. He let out a slow breath. I don't know, he admitted. But I know I don't want it to stop. That wasn't an answer. But it wasn't nothing either. I should have pushed harder. Asked for clarity. Set boundaries. Instead, I stayed right where I was. Right next to him. Yeah, I said quietly. Me neither. That changed something. Not visibly. But I felt it. Like we'd crossed a line just by admitting that. The silence stretched again. But this time, it wasn't neutral. It was heavy. Charged. Jason, he said softly. Yeah. He hesitated. Then, can I ask you something, and you don't deflect it? I huffed a small breath. You really like putting pressure on your questions. He didn't smile. Just answer honestly, he said. That got my attention. Okay, I said. Go ahead. His eyes locked on mine. Do you ever think about me when I'm not here? My heart stuttered slightly. I could have laughed it off. Made a joke. I didn't. Yeah, I said. Simple. Honest. His jaw tightened just a little. Same, he admitted. That was the moment everything became impossible to ignore. Because now it wasn't just late nights. It wasn't just convenience. It wasn't just him needing someone around. It was mutual. And we both knew it. Neither of us moved. But something in the air shifted again. Closer. He glanced at my hand resting on the bed between us. Then back up at me. Like he was asking without saying it. I felt it. That quiet, unspoken question. And for a second, everything in my head went loud. This is where it changes. This is where you either stop it. or you don't. I didn't move my hand, but I didn't pull it away either. That was enough. Slowly, carefully, he shifted closer. Not sudden, not rushed, like he was giving me time to stop him. I didn't. His fingers brushed mine, barely there, but it sent something sharp through my chest. We both froze, not pulling away, not moving further, just there. Still okay? He asked quietly. I swallowed. Yeah, I said. That one word felt bigger than it should have. Like permission, like a decision. His fingers settled more fully against mine. Not gripping, just resting. But it felt like everything. Like we'd crossed something neither of us could uncross. Neither of us spoke for a long time. We didn't need to, because now it was real. Whatever this was, it wasn't just in his head anymore. And it definitely wasn't just about not wanting to be alone. After that, there was no pretending anymore. Not about what this was. Not about what it was turning into. We didn't talk about it the next day. That would have been too direct, too real. Instead, we moved around each other like something fragile had been placed between us, careful not to break it, but also not ignoring it. Cole still came into my room that night. But this time, he paused at the door. Actually paused. Still okay, he asked. That question again. Like he needed to hear it every time. Yeah, I said. And I meant it. He sat next to me like before. Close. Familiar. But now there was no uncertainty about it. Our hands found each other again, without hesitation. No build-up this time. No testing. Just natural. Like we'd already decided. You know this changes things, right? I said quietly. He nodded. Yeah. But you're still here. I told you, he said, glancing at me. I don't want it to stop. There was something steady in his voice now. Less unsure. More certain. And that made my chest tighten in a completely different way. What if it gets complicated? I asked. He huffed softly. It already is. Fair point. A small silence settled between us. Then he added, quieter, I just don't think complicated automatically means bad. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something I hadn't let myself fully process yet. He wasn't the only one leaning into this. I was too. That night felt calmer, not because things were less intense, but because we'd stopped fighting what it was. There was no more "is this weird" hanging in the air. It was just us. A few days later, it shifted again. Not in my room, not at night, but in the middle of the day. We were in the kitchen, bright light, coffee brewing, completely normal setting. Cole was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone while I stood across from him, waiting for the kettle to boil. Nothing unusual. Until, Jason. I looked up. Yeah. He hesitated. Then, do you ever feel like this is only real in your room? That caught me off guard. What do you mean? He gestured slightly. Like, we're one thing there. And then out here, we just pretend nothing's happening. I frowned. Because he wasn't wrong. We're not pretending, I said. Aren't we? He replied quietly. That made something shift in my chest. I hadn't thought about it like that. Not really. But now that he said it, yeah, we were different outside that space. Less close. More careful. Like whatever this was had boundaries neither of us had defined, but both respected. What do you want? I asked. Simple question. Not simple answer. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, I don't want to feel like I disappear when we leave your room. That hit harder than I expected, because it wasn't about labels. It wasn't about rushing anything. It was about something simpler. Being real. I'm not trying to hide you, I said. I know, he replied. But it still kind of feels like that. Silence stretched between us. The kettle started boiling behind me, but neither of us moved. Jason, he said, softer now. I don't need everything figured out. Then what do you need? He stepped a little closer. Not dramatic. Just enough to close the space between us. I need to know this isn't just something that exists when it's convenient. There it was. The real question. I turned off the kettle slowly, buying myself a second. Because this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about what I was willing to admit too. When I turned back to him, he was still there. Still watching me. Waiting. It's not just that, I said finally. His shoulders eased slightly. Then what is it? He asked. I hesitated. Then told the truth. It's just new, I admitted. And I don't want to mess it up by pushing it too fast. He nodded. That's fair. Another pause. Then, quieter, but not pushing it at all kind of feels like pulling away. That landed. Deep. We stood there in silence for a second. Close. Too aware of each other. Too aware of everything we weren't saying. Then, without thinking too much about it, I reached for his hand. Not hidden. Not subtle. Just there. In the middle of the kitchen. He froze for half a second, like he didn't expect it. Then his fingers tightened around mine, and something in his expression changed. Not relief. Something stronger. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, I echoed. It wasn't a big moment. No dramatic shift. But it felt important. Because for the first time, this wasn't just something that existed behind a closed door anymore. And we both knew it. After the kitchen, things stopped feeling divided. There wasn't a your room versus the rest of the apartment anymore. It all blurred together. Cole didn't hesitate to be near me now. Not in an obvious way. Not like he was trying to prove something. But in small, quiet ways that felt intentional. Standing a little closer when we talked. Brushing past me without pulling away too quickly. Looking at me like he didn't have to check who was watching first. It should have made things easier. And in some ways, it did. But it also made everything more real. More visible. Harder to ignore. One evening, we were sitting on the couch. Not my room. Living room. Lights on. TV playing something neither of us cared about. My arm rested along the back of the couch. He was sitting close enough that his shoulder pressed lightly against mine. Neither of us moved. You're quiet, he said. So are you. Yeah, but I asked first. I huffed a small laugh. I'm just thinking. About. I hesitated, then decided not to dodge it. About how this doesn't feel temporary anymore. That got his attention. He turned his head slightly, looking at me. Is that a bad thing? I shook my head. No, just different. He studied me for a second. Then, quietly, I don't want it to be temporary. There was no hesitation in his voice this time. None. That should have felt good. And it did. But it also came with something else. Wait. Because now this wasn't just something we were drifting through. It was something we were choosing. You're very sure about that? I said. I am, he replied. I glanced at him. Since when? He thought about it. Then said, since I realized I don't check if you're going to push me away anymore. That hit deeper than I expected. Jason, he added, softer now. I'm not guessing with you anymore. That sentence settled in my chest in a way I couldn't ignore. Because if he wasn't guessing, that meant he already knew where he stood. Okay, I said slowly. Then where do I stand? He didn't even hesitate. Right here, he said. With me. Simple. Direct. No overthinking. I looked at him for a long moment, trying to figure out why something so simple felt so heavy. So important. Does that scare you? He asked. I exhaled quietly. Yeah, I admitted. Why? Because it means this matters, I said. He nodded like that made perfect sense. Good, he replied. I frowned slightly. Good. Yeah, he said. It should matter. There was something steady about him now. Something that hadn't been there at the beginning. Back then, everything he said felt like a question. Now it felt like a decision. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. Just full. Like both of us were sitting in the same realization at the same time. Cole, I said after a while. Yeah. If this keeps going. I trailed off. He didn't rush me. Just waited. It's not just going to stay simple. I finished. I know, he said. And you're okay with that? He looked at me like the answer was obvious. I'm not doing this halfway, he said. That landed. Hard. Because that was the difference. Before, everything had felt like something we could step back from if we needed to. Now, it didn't feel like that anymore. Neither am I admitted. And that was it. That was the moment it fully shifted. Not because something dramatic happened, but because we both said it out loud. No more we'll see. No more pretending this was just convenience. We stayed like that for a while. Close. Quiet. At some point, Cole leaned his head lightly against my shoulder. Not asking. Not hesitating. Just doing it. I didn't move. Didn't pull away. And for the first time since this all started, it didn't feel like we were figuring something out. It felt like we already had. Later that night, when we ended up in my room again, it wasn't out of habit. It wasn't because he couldn't sleep. It wasn't even something we talked about. We just went. Together. As if there was no reason to be anywhere else. Lying there in the quiet, I realized something. This strange request he made that first night. It wasn't really about sleep. It wasn't even about being alone. It was about this. About finding a reason to stay. And somehow, I had said yes without understanding what I was agreeing to. But now I did. And the part that surprised me most, I didn't regret it. Not even a little. Once we stopped pretending, everything became clearer. Not easier, but clearer. Cole didn't come into my room that night because he couldn't sleep. He came because that's where we ended up. Like it made sense. Like it was the obvious place to be. And that changed something in me. Because now, if he was there, it wasn't out of need. It was a choice. The next morning felt different too. Not awkward, not heavy, just real. I woke up before him. For a second, I didn't move. Just lay there, staring at the ceiling, aware of the quiet weight of everything that had shifted between us. Cole was still asleep beside me. Calm, unbothered. Like this didn't feel complicated to him anymore. That was the thing about Cole. Once he decided something, he didn't second guess it. Jason. His voice was rough with sleep. I glanced over. Yeah. He didn't open his eyes. Just said, "You're thinking too loud again." I huffed a quiet laugh. Didn't know that was a thing. "It is with you," he murmured. I shook my head slightly. "You good?" he added, still half asleep. That question again. But now it felt different. Not uncertain. Just checking in. "Yeah," I said. "I'm good." He nodded faintly, like that was enough, and settled back into the pillow. No tension. No hesitation. That should have calmed me. And it did. But it also made me realize something. He wasn't overthinking this anymore. I was. Later that day, we left the apartment together. First time since everything had shifted. Not planned. Just happened. "Need anything from the store?" he asked, grabbing his keys. "Yeah, I'll come with you," I said. Simple. Normal. But the second we stepped outside, I felt it. That shift. That awareness. Out here, things were different. Not because we wanted them to be, but because this wasn't just our space anymore. Cole didn't pull away. Didn't act different. If anything, he stayed exactly the same. Walking next to me, close enough that our arms brushed occasionally. Talking like nothing had changed. I was the one noticing everything. The space. The people. The fact that this wasn't just ours anymore. "You're doing it again," he said. "What?" "Thinking too much." I glanced at him. "You always this observant." "Only with you." That didn't help. We walked in silence for a minute. Then I said it. "You don't feel weird about this?" He frowned slightly. "About what?" "Being out here. Like this." He stopped walking. I took a step ahead before realizing, then turned back. He was watching me. Not confused. Just focused. "Jason," he said slowly. "What part of this are you questioning?" I hesitated. Then admitted it. All of it. That didn't seem to surprise him. He nodded once. "Okay," he said. "Then let's not pretend." I frowned. "Pretend what?" "That this is something we can turn off depending on where we are." That landed. Hard. Because that's exactly what I'd been doing. Trying to separate it. Control it. Keep it contained. "I'm not trying to hide anything," I said. "I know," he replied. "But you're trying to manage it. And you're not." "No," he said simply. That answer felt unfairly confident. "How?" I asked. He stepped a little closer. Not dramatic, but intentional. "I just don't see a version of this where I act like it's not real." My chest tightened. "That's easy for you to say," I muttered. "Why?" "Because you're not the one overthinking every step." He studied me for a second, then said, softer, "You don't have to figure everything out right now." "I know." "Then stop acting like you do." I let out a slow breath. Because he wasn't wrong. I just didn't know how to not do that. "We can take it slow," he added. "We don't have to label anything." "That's not what I'm worried about." "Then what are you worried about?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth felt bigger than I expected. That this is going to matter more than I'm ready for, I admitted. He didn't laugh. Didn't brush it off. Just nodded. "Yeah," he said. "It probably will." That wasn't comforting, but it was honest. "And you're okay with that?" I asked. He looked at me like the answer hadn't changed since the night before. "I told you," he said. "I'm not doing this halfway." There it was again. That certainty. That steadiness. And for the first time, I stopped trying to match it. Stopped trying to figure out if I was at the same place he was. Instead, I just stood there. With him. "Okay," I said quietly. He didn't ask what that meant. Didn't need clarification. Because somehow, he understood. On the way back, nothing felt forced. Nothing felt hidden. We weren't acting like anything. We were just there. Together. And maybe that was the point. That night, when we ended up in my room again, it didn't feel like a question anymore. It felt like something we'd already answered. At some point, it stopped feeling like something new. Not because it lost meaning, but because it started feeling right. Cole didn't ask anymore if he could come in. I didn't expect him to. There was no hesitation left in that part of us. But something else started to shift. Not between us. Around us. It was subtle at first. Small moments. Like when we'd be out, and I'd catch myself not thinking about who might see us. Or when Cole would say my name in a room full of people, and it didn't feel like something quiet or hidden anymore. It wasn't a big, dramatic change. Just less tension, less holding back. Still, there were moments that reminded me this wasn't simple. Like the night we ran into someone I knew. We were walking back from a late grocery run, talking about nothing, the usual easy conversation that came naturally now. And then, Jason, I turned. Mark. From work. Of course. He walked over, smiling, casual. Didn't expect to see you out here, he said. Yeah, just grabbing stuff, I replied. His eyes shifted to Cole. And this is... There it was. That moment. I felt it immediately. That familiar split-second pause. That choice. Before I could even think. This is Cole, I said. Simple. Direct. Mark nodded, offering a quick hello, already half distracted. We talked for maybe a minute before he left. Nothing unusual. Nothing complicated. But when it was over, the silence felt different. You didn't hesitate, Cole said quietly. I glanced at him. About what? Introducing me. I shrugged lightly. Should I have? He shook his head. No, he said. Just noticed. We kept walking. But I could feel it. That moment had meant something. Not big. Not dramatic. But real. You okay? I asked. Yeah, he said. More than okay. There was something in his voice. Not relief. Something steadier. I think that mattered more than you think, he added. I didn't respond right away. Because part of me knew he was right. Back at the apartment, everything felt settled. Not like something had changed. More like something had clicked into place. We ended up in my room again. Like always. But this time, we didn't turn anything on. No background noise. No distractions. Just quiet. Cole was sitting next to me, closer than ever, but not in a way that felt new anymore. Just familiar. You remember the first night I came in here? He asked. I huffed softly. Hard to forget. I thought you were going to tell me to leave. Why didn't I? He glanced at me. Because you felt it too. That wasn't a question. I looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't try to overthink the answer. Yeah, I said. Silence. But not empty. It wasn't just about sleep, he said. I figured that out eventually. He smiled slightly. Took you a while. Yeah, well, I muttered. You weren't exactly clear. He leaned back slightly, eyes still on me. I didn't know how to be. That hit. Because I understood that. More than I wanted to admit. You do now? I asked. He nodded. Yeah. I studied him for a second. What changed? He didn't hesitate. You stopped acting like this was something temporary. That answer settled deep. Because he was right. At some point, I had stopped waiting for an exit. Stopped treating this like something that needed an explanation before it could exist. You made it easy to stay, he added. That felt familiar. Like something he'd said before. And suddenly, it clicked. This whole thing. It wasn't about one moment. One decision. It was a series of small yes. The first night. Letting him stay. Not pushing him away. Answering honestly. Reaching for him in the kitchen. Not hesitating outside. None of it felt huge at the time. But together, it built this. You know what's funny? I said quietly. What? That strange request you made? He smirked slightly. Yeah. I thought it was about helping you. He tilted his head. And now? I held his gaze. Now I think you knew exactly what you were doing. He didn't deny it. Didn't joke. Just looked at me. Maybe, he said. I shook my head, a quiet smile slipping through. That's insane. Worked, though, he replied. I laughed under my breath. Yeah, I admitted. It did. The room went quiet again. But this time, there was nothing uncertain left in it. No hesitation. No questions we were avoiding. Just something steady. And for the first time since all of this started, I wasn't trying to figure out where it was going. Because wherever it was, I was already there. For a while, nothing changed. And that was the strangest part. No big moment. No dramatic shift. No, what are we? Conversation that people always expect. Just life. Cole still came into my room. Still said my name like it belonged there. Still looked at me like he wasn't questioning it anymore. And I stopped waiting for something to go wrong. That was new. Because if I'm being honest, there had always been a part of me expecting it. Expecting this to fall apart. To get too complicated. To hit some invisible wall where one of us would pull back. But it didn't happen. Instead, things settled. Not boring. Not routine in a bad way. Just steady. One night, we were sitting on the floor, backs against the bed, talking about nothing important. The kind of conversation you don't even remember later, but you remember how it felt. I think this is the first time I'm not overthinking something, I said. Cole glanced at me. That's a big statement for you. Yeah, I know. He was quiet for a second. Then, softer, what changed? I thought about it. Really thought. You, I said. He frowned slightly. That sounds like a lot of pressure. I shook my head. No, not like that. I shifted a little, turning more toward him. You didn't rush me, I explained. You didn't force anything. You just stayed. He held my gaze. And you didn't leave, he said. That felt just as important. Because this wasn't one-sided. It never had been. We sat there in that quiet understanding for a while. You ever think about what would have happened if I didn't knock that first night? He asked. I huffed a quiet breath. Yeah. And I looked at him. I think we would have found our way here anyway, I said. He studied me for a second, then nodded. Yeah, he said. I think so too. Silence settled again. But it wasn't empty. It felt full. I was nervous, you know, he added. That first night. Yeah. I smirked slightly. Didn't seem like it. I was, he insisted. I just didn't know how else to start. That made me pause. Start what? I asked. He didn't look away. This, he said simply. That landed deeper than anything else he'd said all night. Because it confirmed something I'd only half believed before. This hadn't been random. Not entirely. Maybe he didn't have a plan. Maybe he didn't know exactly what this would become. But he knew he wanted something. And somehow. So did I? You really took a risk? I said quietly. He shrugged slightly. Didn't feel like one. Why not? He held my gaze. Because it was you. That shouldn't have hit as hard as it did. But it did. I looked away for a second, exhaling slowly. Yeah, I said. I get that. Because I did. Out of everything that didn't make sense. That part did. Later that night, after the conversation faded into quiet, we just stayed there. Not talking. Not overthinking. Just existing. And I realized something I hadn't fully put into words before. This wasn't intense in a chaotic way. It wasn't messy or unpredictable or overwhelming. It was steady. And somehow, that meant more. You still think it was a strange request? Cole asked suddenly. I smiled slightly. Nah, I said. He raised an eyebrow. No. I shook my head. I think it was just your way of asking for something you didn't know how to say yet. He considered that, then nodded. Yeah, he admitted. That sounds right. I leaned back slightly, looking at the ceiling. And I think, I added, I said yes before I even understood what you were asking. He glanced at me. Do you regret that? He asked. I didn't hesitate. No, not even for a second. Because everything that came after, all the late nights, the conversations, the quiet moments, the uncertainty turning into something real. It all started there. With one knock. One strange request. One simple yes. And somehow, that was enough.